es más que complacer a un cliente. Es un punto de venta conectado al Internet con fibra óptica de Spectrum Business, que registra todas sus transacciones de forma segura y es respaldado con servicio al cliente, las 24 horas del día, 7 días a la semana, localizado en los Estados Unidos y técnicos locales. Es todo lo que importa. Obtén Business Internet Advantage gratis, para siempre, cuando te cambies a Spectrum y obtienes 4 líneas mobile. Visita spectrum.com/free for life para más información. Se aplican restricciones. Servicio no disponible en todas las áreas.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Keeping Karlsson. I'm your host, Jeremy Versillo, and joining me tonight is nobody. This is another solo short shift. I know that Ryan got a chance to do one a couple weeks ago, and Lewis did one on Tuesday, but now it's my turn, all by myself, so let's get rolling. First up for the non-injury news, Igor Chernyshov for the San Jose Sharks has been sent down to the AHL. He's got 11 points in 15 games. He's 100% owned in Cupful. And the day after he was scratched, the coach said it was not about his play. So this is a bit of a head scratcher to me. Even with Kiefer Sherwood and Philip Kurashev both returning to the lineup soon, there's still room in the top 9 for Chernyshov. I highly doubt that Pavel Regenda has surpassed him. I wonder if this is one of those funky developmental decisions. I think you have to cut him from your fantasy teams at this point, even though, I'd like to hold on a couple more days to get additional news. On the injury front, we have a bunch of injuries and outjuries in the past couple days. Darcy Kuemper left his game in the first period Tuesday night after taking a bump to the head. Important to note here that he pulled himself. This was not a concussion spotter. Based on comments today, it sounds like he pinched a nerve in his neck and his arm went dead, which sounds kind of scary, but everything was fine yesterday and he was back on the ice today. I actually did preemptively add Anton Forsberg in a league. I'm hoping with his strong performance on Tuesday and the minor injury to Kuemper that Forsberg will get the Saturday start against St. Louis, which is a pretty good opponent. And then he'll start twice next week because the Kings play 5 times. You'll want a second or third goalie next week if you can fit one, because it's a pretty bad streaming week for forwards with so many games on Thursday and Saturday. So making sure you're getting your lineup filled via those goalie slots is helpful, and Anton Forsberg may do the job for you. But don't be worried about Darcy Kuemper's injury. It sounds like he's ready to play Saturday if they need him. Our next injury comes from a surprise late scratch last night. According to the coach, Mason McTavish either hurt himself in or after warmups. I'm not exactly sure how you hurt yourself after warmups, but either way, he did not play last night and is day-to-day, best we can tell. Chris Kreider benefited by taking his power play 1 slot, and Jansen Harkins took his even strength slot, although that may have been just making do with who was in the building that day. If he's out longer, lines may shuffle a bit, but Chris Kreider would be the big winner. I'm also okay dropping Mason McTavish if you don't have IR space and he's out a bit longer. He's kind of a 55-point pace fringe streamer option, and the Ducks have other offensive threats to go to before him. One last fantasy-relevant injury. Oliver Ekman-Larsson got hurt last night, and it's a, quote, lower body issue that is expected to cause him to miss some time. He's 100% owned in Cupful, which kind of surprises me a bit, because outside of a few recent multi-point games, he's really slowed down. I'd definitely be cutting him if you're tight on IR space. Also, Brandon Carlo on the Leafs tweaked something, so that leaves them very thin on the right side of defense. Jake McCabe may start getting enough minutes to be banger hit block relevant. Troy Stetcher might be their right D1, and Felipe Myers probably gets called up. I'm not interested in any of those guys, and there's no prospects that interest me. This is kind of just Oliver Ekman-Larsson is out, and nobody's going to fill that void from that team for your fantasy team. One last quick hit before we get to the outjury news. David Perron missed practice today, and Stephen Halliday is on the 4th line for the Senators. I don't think there's much relevance here outside of Perron, maybe a guy you streamed in this week who you're not going to get games from. Fourth liner really slowed down this year. Next up on the outjuries, though, Tom Wilson returns the Capitals lineup last night, potting a power play assist in his return. He was playing on the second line with Alexei Protas and Justin Sordiff, making them both slightly more interesting, but I don't think either of those guys are fantasy relevant long-term just because they play on a line with Tom Wilson. Another gritty, annoying guy returning from injury, Mason Marchment, will be returning to the Blue Jackets lineup today. He's immediately jumping onto the top line with Adam Fantilli and Kirill Marchenko, bumping Sillinger down to the third line. Marchment is only 88% owned in Cupful and 15% in Yahoo, so take a look. He's a priority ad with the upside that he displayed in his first game after the trade, and Columbus's schedule next week is really good for, like I said before, a bad streaming week, so I'd be happy to add Mason Marchment to my team if he's available. Two Chicago top sixers returning to the lineup today. Andrei Burakovsky is back after missing one game with illness. He'll be playing line 1 and power play 1, and Frank Nazar returns to center line 2 with Donato and Bertuzzi. He's on power play 2, though. I'm hoping he can take Ryan Green's power play 1 slot by the end of the week, but if he doesn't, I'm not sure he'll produce enough to hold. He's 82% owned in Cupful, although that's probably due to IR stashing. I expect that to go down. He started off really hot this year, Frank Nazar did, and had really cooled off by the time he got hurt. I think he's a low-end roster guy or a streamer, depending on if he gets that good deployment back. Back to the trend of really annoying to play against real-life players coming back from injury. Martin Pospisil has returned to the lineup for the Calgary Flames. That's a name you probably haven't heard in a while because he hasn't played a game yet this season. He had a long-term injury. I think it might have been a torn ACL that he's been rehabbing from. He did have 5 hits in his first game back, and he averaged 3.7 hits per game last year. He'll likely drop down to the fourth line when Huberdeau and Coleman get healthy, but he's definitely a name to know for banger leagues. Michael Kesselring is returning for the Buffalo Sabres pretty soon, I think tonight. He might be a ad if you're desperate on defense. Buffalo's been very good over the last month, and Byram, Dahlem, and even Samuelsson have been fantasy-relevant defensemen. Michael Kesselring showed some offense in Arizona before he got traded this summer, but it might be hard to produce on Buffalo from the third unit and no power play time. That's kind of a wait and see for me. You could add him if you're looking for defense and you're in a deep league, or if you see a good Buffalo schedule coming up, but not an immediate go out and get him. Last but not least, some injury updates from Minnesota. Matt Boldy is skating and, quote, trending towards day-to-day. Boldy's return absolutely spells the end to Tarasenko's run of terror, as Tarasenko has been lights out on the power play in Boldy's replacement. Also, just got news like 10 minutes ago, Joel Eriksson Ek is off of IR, so it sounds like he's playing tonight. Marcus Johansson was listed as a game-time decision this morning, so keep an eye on him. He may be back in the lineup also. The Minnesota Wild are getting much more healthy. With that, it's time for a quick ad break, and on the return, I'll walk you through some deeper topics here.
The jaw-dropping moments that make hockey, hockey. Experience them all with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. Missouri listeners, listen up. DraftKings Sportsbook is now live in the Show Me State. New customers, this one's for you. Bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN to turn $5 into $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas, pass-through of per-wager tax may apply in Illinois. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Restrictions apply. Bet must win to receive bonus bets which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. Limited time offer. Copyright NHL 2025. All rights reserved.
es más que complacer a un cliente. Es un punto de venta conectado al Internet con fibra óptica de Spectrum Business, que registra todas sus transacciones de forma segura y es respaldado con servicio al cliente, las 24 horas del día, 7 días a la semana, localizado en los Estados Unidos y técnicos locales. Es todo lo que importa. Obtén Business Internet Advantage gratis, para siempre, cuando te cambies a Spectrum y obtienes 4 líneas mobile. Visita spectrum.com/free for life para más información. Se aplican restricciones. Servicio no disponible en todas las áreas.
Welcome back. While I was taking my break, I did get news that the David Perron injury mentioned in the first half is actually sports hernia surgery, and he's out for 5 to 7 weeks. So you can absolutely cut him anywhere you own him. And Stephen Halliday seems like a regular fixture on the fourth line for the next 5 to 7 weeks. Wanted to now take a look at some takeaways from the first 4 games for the Columbus Blue Jackets under Rick Bowness. Whenever a coach changes, it's always interesting to see which players are winners and losers from it. And with Columbus having a very good schedule next week for streaming, let's take a look at the deployment and maybe you can get an early jump on some guys that are undervalued and add them to your squad. The biggest loser here is Dmitri Voronkov. I actually think he's just a straight up cut after next week's good schedule. He's found himself on the fourth line and off of power play 1. His time on ice is slumping, having 9 to 11 minutes in a couple games recently. Another guy whose time on ice is dipping quite a bit and is off power play 1 is Sean Monahan, who I think is widely available anyway, so not really going to call him a cut if he's already in the free agent pool. So those are 2 guys that are kind of losers from this. To be clear, I'd still be holding Voronkov and Monahan as streamers for next week, but especially Voronkov, you may have to be changing your tune on him if he's still on the fourth line 4 or 5 games from now. As for guys who are benefiting, Adam Fantilli's time on ice, shots, and hits are all way up. His hits are actually like 2.5 to 3 per game, which is crazy for a high-skill player like him. This is all good signs given his draft status and potential upside. I know when he was drafted, people were giving him 90, 100+ point upside. I think he's young enough that that is still quite possible, and he may be breaking out if he gets this type of deployment for the rest of the season. He's universally owned in Cupful, but may be available elsewhere. The most actionable change, though, is Kent Johnson is also a big winner. He's already up to 63% owned in Cupful. I think people have noticed. He's center, left wing, right wing eligible, so should fit just about any roster. His time on ice is up from the 14-minute range to the 18-minute range, and he's been on power play 1 recently, and they've been running a pretty hot power play last I checked. The downside with Johnson is he's definitely a risk for cardio sessions. He doesn't really hit a ton, and his shots leave a little bit to be desired, but the deployment change is enough for me to consider adding him, especially if you add him as a streamer next week and he just pops off, then all of a sudden he's a permanent fixture of your roster going forward. The last thing I wanted to look at as far as Columbus deployment under the new coach is the goalies. Elvis Merzlikins had started a bunch of games in a row recently, but then he got sick, which led to him trying to start a game while sick, immediately getting pulled for Greaves early in the first period, and then Greaves played the next game, which is tonight, I believe. Also, through December and early January, Greaves had started like 12 games in a row, so I don't know if Merzlikins was hurt or just not ready to play. I don't think either of them have any value in a 50-50 situation, and it's really hard to tell what Bowness's plan is. At first, it kind of seemed like he may be more interested in Elvis Merzlikins than the previous coach was, but Greaves has really played well, so I'd be surprised if it's much more than a 50-50 for either of them. Either way, might be worth speculating on Merzlikins, who's 37% owned. If indeed he ends up as Bowness's guy, that's a free goalie off the wire. But if it devolves to a 50-50, I don't think either of them are worth holding on your fantasy team long term. That leads me nicely into the next segment, because I'm also going to look at 2 other goalie tandems that I'm trying to read the tea leaves on. Tristan Jarry has returned for Edmonton, and it looks like he's taking starter minutes now. He's started 2 in a row. I think he's been really good as an Oiler. They still have to decide what to do with Ingram and Picard at backup, so maybe both of them will sneak into games occasionally as they decide that. They're in a risky spot if they lose one of them to waivers, but Connor Ingram is 80% owned in Cupful. I think he's a safe drop now. I don't see this being a 50-50. I think this is Jerry 2 out of every 3 games, and eventually they'll figure out who the real backup is. And maybe it is Ingram, but even then, that's not worth owning him for 1 out of every 3 starts. That's my opinion on the Edmonton situation, at least. The other situation that's gotten a bit interesting is Skinner and Shilovs in Pittsburgh. Since the trade, they'd been alternating starts until last night, where Skinner got his second start in a row. From the coach, I think both guys have been playing really well. I think Stu, just based off his play, his record coming off of the break, we're going into the front ends of back-to-back, felt like he earned that right. So that was the decision. What I'm hearing here is he's slightly taken the edge. They want him starting the front ends of the back-to-back, give him 1 extra start. There's also a beat writer I saw, I forget which one, so I can't credit them, who said that he believes that Skinner should be starting 2 out of every 3 based on how the 2 goalies have played so far. So based on those 2 pieces of news, I think it's safe to drop Shilovs and consider adding Skinner if he's available. Looks like Cupful's already ahead of me on this, as Skinner is 96% owned and Shilovs is only 12% owned. Skinner will presumably get the Sunday start against Vancouver, and then Pittsburgh only plays twice next week, so maybe each one gets a start. Either way, Skinner's the guy to own in Pittsburgh right now. On to hot-cold, it's time for some more goalie talk. Lucas Dostal has really gotten going lately. He's had 3 quality starts in his last 4 games, positive goals save above expected in all 4. The team is still getting shelled, though, with 3 to 5 expected goals against per game, which is really hard for a goalie to weather and continue to put up 1 or 2 goals saved above expected. I don't think that the shots against and the expected goals against is going to get better when the team gets healthy either. If anything, it actually could get worse because the injured guys are all offensive players. Dostal's great. He'll get you volume. I don't know if there's much actionable here. I certainly wouldn't be trying to buy on Dostal, but he has turned his season around, and if he's available in any of your leagues, take a look. He could get you some volume and some save percentage. Another guy who's been hot lately is Matty Beniers on the Seattle Kraken. He's currently 100% rostered in Cupful, and for good reason. He has 5 goals and 4 assists in his last 10 games, along with 23 shots, which is about a half shot per game above his season average. He's on pace for 54 points now, which would be his best since his rookie year. But all the underlying numbers are exactly in line with last season at this point. I think he's just getting some puck luck in the last 10 games, and his season averages more tell the tale. He's a 55-ish point center, 2-ish shots per game. I'd be fine streaming him out with the busy schedule next week. I don't think he's going to suddenly break out. That's not the type of player he is, and I think he's kind of turning into a good 50 to 60 defensively responsible center, not some sort of superstar turn that you're going to want on your fantasy roster every week. One last hot streak, and to me this is kind of a fascinating story. Anthony Duclair had a hat trick and 2 assists on January 6th, a couple games ago. Since then, he's potted 5 additional goals in 7 games. He's getting even strength time with Barzal and Lee, and power play 1 time. He's always been an annoyingly streaky player, but what if this time the hot streak is caused by something new, like a new stick? You heard me right. A recent report came out that the practice before the game he had the hat trick in, he, quote, just grabbed Casey Sedikis' stick after practice, and his shot was unbelievable. The new stick is a different model and curve, which, for those of you who don't know, can be quite different feels for a hockey player. The streak is probably just a combination of the placebo effect, some good deployment, and the equipment change. But from my experience playing for the last 25 years, I agree that a stick change can result in a drastically different feel on your shot and release. So maybe there is something here. Obviously, 5 goals on 12 shots since the hat trick game is not sustainable. But even if Duclair is getting a small boost from the equipment change, and it's enough to keep him getting line 1 power play 1 deployment. That can add a little bit more of a boost, and maybe he's worth an ad or even a watch list. He's 51% owned in Cupful and has Monday, Wednesday, Thursday games next week, so he might be a good ad to see what happens with this new stick hot streak. And by the way, he officially placed an order from their trainer of a bunch more sticks cut to Casey Cizikas' specifications. Now let's finish off this short shift with an ice bath. Here's some players who have been freezing cold over the last 7 to 10 games. Mackenzie Weegar has 0 points in his last 8. He did not get power play 1 with the Anderson trade, and it looks more like a 50-50 power play split anyway. Weegar's hits and blocks are still there, so I'm not dropping him, especially given his draft stock, but he's certainly frustrating, and I don't see much of a turnaround happening. Timo Meier has 1 point in his last 9 games. He's not on power play 1, but he does have 32 shots over the last 9 games, and he has 5 different 7-shot games in his last 15 games. That's basically saying a third of the time he's going out there and taking 7 shots. He also has around a hit and a block per game. I'd actually be trying to buy low on Meier here. Maybe these shots are keeping his fantasy value high enough that the owner's not willing to sell. But if anybody looks at it and is like, man, he has 1 point in his last 9 games and not in power play 1, maybe you can buy low. Another guy, Valeri Nichushkin, since his hat trick on December 31st, has 1 point and 11 shots in 8 games. He's line 2, power play 2 right now. I wouldn't fault you for dropping him, but ideally I'd like to hold through the Olympic break, as he's a Russian and will get the break to rest up instead of playing in the Olympics. It's possible that the shot and ice time dips are due to a nagging injury, and with getting more than 2 weeks worth of rest, that could make it a bit easier for him to come back and be his old self. Last but not least, I mentioned this guy in our outjury section actually. Alexei Protas is a surprising 100% owned guy in Cupful. He's got 1 point and 15 shots in his last 7 games since returning from a minor injury. He gets almost no power play time and barely hits or blocks. He did have a great hot streak in December, but it was completely unsustainable with the shooting percentage and on-ice shooting percentage. I think you're snoozing if you still have him. He's a better real life than a fantasy player, and playing with Justin Sordiff and Tom Wilson is not enough to drag a guy to fantasy relevance. With that, that's all we have time for. I hope you enjoyed this solo short shift. If you enjoyed it, please consider joining the Keeping Karlsson Patreon group at keepingkarlsson.com/patron. Super supporters receive ad-free episodes, and you can interact with Brian, Elon, the rest of the Short Shifts crew, and hundreds of other talented fantasy managers on our active Discord server. Check out www.gamedaytweets.com to get all the best info from Twitter without having to slog through the rest of that place. It includes team by team and searchable tweets by player name. Visit that site and the other great sites we use to research our episodes with at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. Until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.
Es más que complacer a un cliente. Es un punto de venta conectado al Internet con fibra óptica de Spectrum Business, que registra todas sus transacciones de forma segura y es respaldado con servicio al cliente, las 24 horas del día, 7 días a la semana, localizado en los Estados Unidos y técnicos locales. Es todo lo que importa. Obtén Business Internet Advantage gratis, para siempre, cuando te cambies a Spectrum y obtienes 4 líneas mobile. Visita spectrum.com/free for life para más información. Se aplican restricciones. Servicio no disponible en todas las áreas.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.